in history, you're trying to study history, not to memorize dates and different things, but what kind of consciousness is expressed and how did it affect people? You know, like if somebody was a dictator and was, you know, very restrictive and made everybody, you know, do exactly what he wanted to do, did that create happiness? Which game was more fun? Which game did you enjoy more? And you'll almost unanimously, you'll get the people saying, oh, this cooperative way is. Oh, so cooperation is a good thing to do? So when you cooperate, you know, does it make things makes you feel better? So now we have a reason for the morality, for the kindness or whatever it is, because from their own experience, they know that it makes them feel better. Somebody asked me once, they said, we were getting our accreditation review, and the agency was coming and said, well, what's your basis for expelling a child? On what grounds do you ask children to leave? And I thought, I hadn't thought about that.
Okay.
Honesty. Because if a student can't be honest with me, there's no basis to grow on. It's like I realize that's the foundation, is just being willing to be honest with each other. True maturity is being able to relate to other people's realities.
Right. Listening to them, I guess, understanding their perspective.
Understanding, yes.
Yeah, because most of the times I look, when you're having a conversation with somebody, people are just listening to you so that they can promptly give a reply. Namaskar. Welcome to the Meeting Point podcast. I'm really happy and honored to have Nayaswami Nitai Deranja as our guest for this podcast. Nitai is one of the co-founders of Education for Life. Education for Life is a holistic education approach which is based on the principles and practices of Paramhansa Yogananda. Do you remember Autobiography of a Yogi? Yes. So Education for Life basically aims at inculcating certain values, life skills, a certain maturity in the children and the adults while helping them achieve their academic success. So let's welcome Nayaswami Nitai Deranja for our podcast. Hello Nitai, welcome to the Meeting Point podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. So my first curious question is about, what is EFL, the Education for Life? What is it about?
Okay. Well, education is obviously the topic, and then life is the second key word.
Yeah.
And but it's a very expansive and inclusive definition of the word life. It's like, okay, why are we here? What's the purpose of life?
Right.
How do we know if we're moving in the right direction? How do we know if our lives are going forwards or backwards or sideways? And so Education for Life comes out of the yoga tradition from India. Its founding, foundation place is in Ranchi in India, 1916.
Okay.
So a little over 100 years ago now, by a man who's known to most people as Paramhansa Yogananda. At that time, he was Mukunda Lal Ghosh.
Okay.
But he, as most people have read Autobiography of a Yogi, know that he had a tremendous mission to bring these ancient teachings to Westerners, myself included.
Right.
But before he started that mission, he had his first thing. He was only, he would have been about 23, 24 years old when he founded this school.
Okay.
And he wanted an alternative to what was available then and actually still in India. Tends to be schools that were kind of pushed on India by the British, that they didn't appreciate the Indian culture, and they imposed the British culture. British culture has a lot of good strengths to it, obviously, but it's very superficial from the angle of we're looking at from ancient traditions,
right?
Because it doesn't incorporate the spiritual part. the British were very good at religion and missionaries and all this part, but it was it wasn't on the level of spirituality. It was on the level of dogmatism and just learning, the Christian religion, I guess you'd say. Which, of course, there are a lot of good parts to the Christian religion, but it can be imposed on people in a bad way sometimes. So he wanted to establish an alternative to that, and he did. Very, very humble beginnings. It actually started a year before in a place called Dihika, which is 4 or 5 hours from Ranchi, with a small group. I think it was about 6 or 7 boys. They had no funds, so they were just kind of creating as they went. Their first project was to pour some cement so they could have a floor for the place they were having the school. But Yogananda had a tremendous magnetism, and even at that early age, and started to attract notice. And so within a year, one of the Maharajas close to there had found out about this school and was intrigued. And invited Yogananda to interview, and the interview was a rousing success, and to the point where the Maharaja gave him basically his summer home in Ranchi as a campus for his school. Complete with orchards and farmland and buildings and everything. And so for the next 3 years, until 1920, this school just blossomed tremendously. Huge amount of interest. I think they had 2,000 applications very quickly. But then, in the divine play, there was another step for Yogananda personally, which was he was asked by his guru and by others to take this message of yoga to the West, and that there was this deep need in the West for balance. What I described about the British was, of course, also true in the United States. It was lacking spiritual depth. So he brought these ideas to the West and spent the rest of his life until early 1950s in the West. So he couldn't do 2 things at once. He couldn't stay in India and keep the school going, and he couldn't also have this work in the West. And the work in the West had the higher priority. So these educational ideals kind of stayed in seed form for quite a while. But then in the early 1970s, we had the opportunity to implement. There was a spiritual community founded in California called Ananda. And there was a place where people who'd come who really wanted to wanted to implement the spiritual path in their life completely. Not just something they would meditate in the morning, but they wanted their whole life to be around the spiritual principles. So this community formed under this guidance of one of Yogananda's chief disciples, a man named Swami Kriyananda. And I arrived on the scene at that point, and they said, we need a teacher. And I happened to have just finished my teacher training. And so we stepped into this process of, so what is education for life, to go back to your original idea? And I was new. At that point, I was 25 years old, I guess.
And which year was this?
This is 1972.
72,
So we just started learning. I started learning. I thought, well, I know what it's not, because I was raised in a Catholic grammar school, and I had experienced a religious approach, and I knew that religion was not the answer, because it didn't have a good effect on me. It pushed me away rather than drawing me in. But I thought, what does it mean to have a spiritual element? So we started very simply, with stories from the Ramayana, which all of you will be very familiar with. It was brand new to me, and one of my favorite stories I'll tell. It helped me to just kind of get a deeper appreciation for what this might be. So I would come in and I would tell the stories a little bit at a time each day, and it was very successful. The children we started with 7 children too, ages 4 to 8. And so I had never read this book before in my life either. So I would study the book the night before, and then I'd bring my notes in and I would tell the story. And the kids, of course, loved it. you can't be a bad storyteller for children. So they're just enthralled. So I would tell a little chapter a day, and so but I will always stop because if there were big words used, I wanted to check to make sure they understood the vocabulary. So one of the first stories, we get to the point in the Ramayana where Hanuman leaps into the air and flies like a meteor across to Sri Lanka. And do you remember that story from when you were a child?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Of course, everybody knows it. So, but I'd use the word meteor, and I wasn't sure my kids knew what meteor was. So I stopped and I said, okay, well, what does it mean that Hanuman was flying through the sky like a meteor? And one of the children raised their hand, and I said, okay, what is it? It says, well, a meteor is somebody that eats meat.
Oh my God, okay.
So I knew that we needed to keep working on the vocabulary, and the idea of Hanuman flying through the sky eating a hamburger was not exactly what we meant. So, so that then, the very same day, I think, or maybe it was the next day, it came to the story where Rama and was going through the forest, and he came across a man sitting very quietly under a tree in samadhi. And so I thought, okay, we'll see what happens. So samadhi is a very big word. Does anybody know what samadhi means? And so the youngest little girl raises her hand. She's 4 years old. Her name's Nicole. So I said, Nicole, okay, what does samadhi mean? She says, well, samadhi is when you're sitting there and you're very quiet and very still. And somebody says, Nicole, Nicole, and there's nobody there to answer.
Wow, this was her explanation.
This is her explanation. I was dumbfounded. I just that the fact that a 4-year-old could give an answer like that. And it helped me just realize, oh, there's a depth here. There's a depth here that I need to explore and to, really, that's how I'm going to learn about what a spiritual education is.
Right.
So we started exploring, and so over the years, of course, it's been much more explained now, codified. It's been 54 years, is that right? 52 years. So we come up with the dimension, we call it a dimension of consciousness that is at the core of education for life. So you'd say, well, what's the purpose of education? If you ask somebody, well, why do you have a school? Well, people usually give an answer, well, it prepares children to go to a good college. It might prepare them to get a good job in life. It might prepare them to take their place in society and have a status in some sort if they go to the right school, if you get the right test scores. But for most people, it's going to be external. That dimension, whether maybe you're measuring it by test scores, which is very common. What are the top schools? How do they decide what the top schools are? They look at the test scores of their students. They, okay, this school gets 97.3. This is 97.2. It's not as good as school. So, especially in India, I've been in many countries, and India and Japan, I'll have to say, are the two countries that are most hypnotized by this idea that test scores determine success. People just are stuck there, and again, it's not. It's not a good judge. It's not. Everybody who's gone through that system knows that it really doesn't. What's the Indian word when you cram? Mugging it. Mugging. Yeah. You get the best test scores are the people that are best at mugging. Well, what use is mugging when you're an adult? It's like it creates stress. So it's not a sound system. So we replace that system and say, well, what we're really about is raising consciousness. And we talk about progressive development, we talk about maturity. We define maturity as the ability to relate to other consciousness beyond your own. To help expand your consciousness might be to relate to another person. So if you're talking to a person, you actually hear what they're saying. You don't just wait for them to stop so you can start talking, you're talking again. Or you're arguing with them. You're just, Right. It means to be able to be open to their ideas and to be able to respond to it. So that's one kind of expression of this idea. Okay. But there are many, many other expressions. This morning I heard one of the teachers was talking about, she works with young children. This little 4-year-old boy seemed to specialize in squashing millipedes. Whenever you see a millipede, he'd run over and he'd stomp on it.
Okay.
And so she was trying to work with him. It's like, okay, said, let's look at the millipede. What's happening to the millipede? Is he moving? No, he doesn't move anymore because you stepped on him. He said, oh, do you think it feels good not to be able to move anymore? And the little, oh. And so she started the little boy thinking about expanding his consciousness to include the reality of the millipede. And she said yesterday he came up and he said to her, look, there's a millipede over there, and I didn't step on him, and look how fast he's moving.
Oh, wow.
But she had expanded his consciousness.
Yes.
And so that is a tiny little example of it. You're trying to do that in many, many ways. In history, you're trying to study history, not to memorize dates and different things, but what kind of consciousness is expressed and how did it affect people? You know, like if somebody was a dictator and was, you know, very restrictive and made everybody, you know, do exactly what he wanted to do, did that create happiness? Did that create, you know, people feeling good about themselves? Or did it create anger, tension, hopelessness, despair, all these other things? But you're trying to, so you're using history as a tool to study consciousness. And if you're studying math, so, well, in math, it's more skill oriented, but there are certain skills that are much more important than the topic. So, like I tell them, I actually teach math. So you I tell you, you know, probably only a very few of you are ever going to use quadratic equations when you're an adult.
Yeah, true.
Exactly.
True.
So why do we learn them? Well, we learn them because we're going to train our minds. We're going to train our minds to develop reasoning powers, to develop concentration powers. We're also going to have to develop perseverance in solving these problems because they're not easy to do. You're going to have to learn how to use your willpower to keep your energy flowing and not just give up. Are you going to use those skills later on? Yeah. So what's more important? It's more important to learn these skills, right? And the subject matter is just a tool for that. So it shifts the focus. Most schools are, I say, curriculum oriented, where those quadratic equations you've got to learn them because if you don't learn them, you're not going to get a good score on the test. To saying, well, in the process, we're trying to learn these, like we call them life skills. In this case, willpower, concentration, things like that. So basically, that's what Education for Life is all about. It's trying to see this. It's radical because it's very different. It's like taking a telescope and turning it around and looking at the other end from the traditional approach.
Right.
Because it's not on those outward department. It's more on the inner development, inner qualities. So it's very different.
I don't remember studying like this in my schools, at least.
Yes.
You know, the approach was very different. It was like, you know, the subjects that you study, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
There's no. I guess it's only now that students have moral science, perhaps, in the school, but that's again has ended up a subject for many people, which they have to study to pass. That was what
I was saying. I experienced moral science, or we called it catechism in my school.
Okay.
But it was not. There was no depth to it. It was just on the
there's no depth to it.
Yes, and so it didn't really help you. So.
Yeah. So are we trying to include this sort of system, the Education for Life system, into the regular schooling that is happening currently? Are we trying to integrate both of these?
Yes, that's why I'm here in India. I came 3 years ago. I live up in Gurgaon.
Okay.
And outside of Delhi, for those who don't know where that is. And I was invited there specifically to can we bring Education for Life into the existing public schools? So the approach we've come up with, it would have been a very big job to change the whole school system.
Yeah.
So what we did, we call them living laboratories. And it's fairly easy to implement. It's only one period a week. And at first I wasn't sure that it was going to be worthwhile, if it was enough time to make a difference.
Yeah.
But I've been very surprised. It's made a huge difference. One period a week, again, the other thing, especially in an Indian school system, you can't do this kind of education on a mass basis. So if even you have 30 students in a class, it's not going to work. It's too many minds, too many bodies to make it personal. And this whole thing has to be personal to work.
Okay.
So for one period a week, though, I talked to the directors and they said, for one period a week, we can cut the size down to 12 per teacher. So each teacher will have a maximum of 12 students.
Okay.
But they're going to meet for one period a week, and we'll call them living laboratories.
All right.
And so then I worked with the teachers for about, I'd say about 6 or 8 weeks, training them to know what this whole idea was about. And then the teachers step into their groups. And so they have their 12 students, and they explore life.
All right.
Living laboratory. So it's a laboratory because I said, I don't want a lesson I don't want a moral lesson. I want an experience. I want an investigation.
Yes.
So like, okay, if we take something like kindness, why should you be kind? So why would somebody want to be kind? At first thought of, well, why? I don't need them. It's not helping me to be kind to somebody else. So let's explore. Let's investigate it. So with the students, you'll do games or activities. One of the ones that came up was I was new to me. This is one of the teachers there came up with it. She took the game of musical chairs, which everybody knows.
Okay.
You play musical chairs when you're a little kid, right?
Yeah.
Then you have these 10 chairs and 11 kids, and the music stops. You got to find a chair, and somebody's left out, and somebody have to stand on the side. It's a hugely competitive game.
Yes.
And about toward the end, people are pushing each other out of the way. Probably somebody's crying, but anyway, somehow it's a game that gets played a lot. So she said, "Well, we're working on kindness, actually cooperation. I think it was the theme. So we're going to change one rule, and the only thing that's different is that you can share your chair with your friend, a friend of yours. So first of all, you have 10 chairs, 11 kids. The music stops. One kid doesn't have, and people are saying, "Come over here, come over here." Sit here.
Okay.
And then you take one chair away. 11 kids, 9 chairs. Come here, sit down. By the end, you have 11 kids trying to figure out how they can all sit on one chair.
Oh,
to cooperate.
Fabulous.
And nobody gets left out in the silent. Everybody's included, and they're trying to cooperate. And then the key, of course, is at the end of this, you stop and say, okay, you play it both ways. You play it the original way, and then you play it this cooperative way. And you say, which game was more fun? Which game did you enjoy more? And you'll almost unanimously, you'll get the people saying, oh, this cooperative way is. Oh, so cooperation is a good thing to do? So when you cooperate, does it make things makes you feel better? So now we have a reason for the morality, for the kindness or whatever it is, because from their own experience, they know that it makes them feel better. And it's a very different approach from what I was brought, which was do it, or in my case, you're going to go to hell. So it was, I thought, oh, this is, so that was what I was learning all these years. This is what a spiritual education would be like. It would be experiential, and it would come from the child's own awareness is what you're trying to awaken.
Right.
Like with the little boy with the millipedes, stomping on the millipedes, the teacher was trying to awaken rather than just say, no, you're naughty, don't step on those millipedes anymore, because she said she was trying to awaken his awareness to it, which is what we're all about.
Yeah, I guess through experiences is what children also learn instead of just by words, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
That's been proven over and over again in all education. People know that experiences, I do and I learn. I remember and I forget, I do and I learn. And
right.
So they know that on all levels, but now we're just applying it in this particular area.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about this game. I think, in India, even adults play this game. Okay, musical chair.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to play it that way.
Yeah, it is.
Instead of, making it competitive.
Yeah. And if you step and you look back at what are we actually teaching children? Often we're teaching them competition. Yeah. This whole testing hypnosis, I call it, what it teaches is competition. I've got to get a better score than you, even though you're my best friend. If I don't get a better score than you, I'm not a success. It's horrible. It's a horrible ethic to build into the society. There must be another way to develop so that it's a cooperative. So it's but the more people I help, the better it is, rather than the more people I shove aside. So.
True. So when you are trying to integrate it in normal, regular schools, are we doing it right from the like the KG or the first, second standard, and then going upwards?
Yeah, you go. These schools in Gurgaon are from pre-nursery, so like
Pre-nursery,
2.5-year-olds up through 12th standard, so it'd be 18-year-olds.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. Of course, it changes as you work with the older age groups.
Yeah. The approach will change, I guess, and interesting. So, is this education based on any core principles or core values around which the whole curriculum is planned?
When your consciousness expands, you feel better.
True.
And so as you get into it, you want to cultivate that. You want to cultivate your own sensitivity to these subtler principles. So so honesty is a big one. In the schools that we have, somebody asked me once, they said, we were getting our accreditation review, and the agency was coming and said, well, what's your basis for expelling a child? On what grounds do you ask children to leave? And I thought, I hadn't thought about that.
Okay.
Honesty. Because if a student can't be honest with me, there's no basis to grow on. It's like I realize that's the foundation, is just being willing to be honest with each other, teacher to student, vice versa. So that would be a core principle.
Okay.
So there are these 4 principles anyway that we try to integrate into everything that we do. Oh, and service. Adventure, service, self-discovery, and personal excellence. So those are the 4 foundational themes. And so they're interesting to explore. Service, obviously, you're reaching outside of yourself.
Right.
Self-discovery, you're trying to learn what's going on inside you and become aware of it so you can work with it. Adventure, all children, that's kind of built in, that if you're cultivating that adventurous spirit, they're probably enjoying school.
Right.
And then personal excellence, each child you're trying to find out where do they excel. So this brings us to another part. So another key part of education for life, we call it an awards ceremony. An awards ceremony.
Award ceremony. Okay.
So this comes from the fact that when I first started teaching, I looked at who got the awards, and there were about 5-10% of the students got all the awards.
Okay.
They were the best student, the best whatever it all was. And I thought, that doesn't feel right to me. Because it's very narrow, it's very skewed. If you have a mind that's good at memory, you probably get a lot of awards. But that's not necessarily the only part of life. So at the end of the school year, or now with these laboratories, at the end of the laboratory cycle, each teacher, now you've got these 12 students, okay? So the teacher's job is to figure out what is the quality that's most dynamic in this child.
Okay.
And then we're going to reward that quality. We're going to have a little ceremony. We invite the parents, and each student comes up, and the teacher says, "Okay, they're getting an award for, might be, let's see, well, it could be kindness." Okay.
Okay.
And so the student is being rewarded for kindness, and then they'll tell a story of why they took that some incident that they observed where the child showed that quality. And every single child gets rewarded. Now, when I was at one of these schools in Delhi the first year, and there was a girl there who I think she had Down syndrome to some extent. So you could tell she was different, and I don't think she'd ever been able to get any kind of an award for anything. But she was called up in front of her family, and she got an award for, I forget what the award was for at that point. It might have been, I don't remember. Let's see. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. But she got the award, and she had this huge smile on her face, and just it meant so much to her to be honored for something that was real to her. She knew that she did have that quality. It was something that she resonated with, which is one of the things I tell the teachers. It's got to be something that's real. So anyway, that's another part. That's the personal excellence part of the curriculum. Is that everybody is going to be excellent in some way. What was it? Einstein. I just found a quote about Einstein. It says, everybody's equal. But if you're comparing if you're measuring the ability to climb trees and you're comparing yourself to a monkey, you're probably not going to come out on top. So,
Okay.
so the problem is in education, there's only a couple of traits that are acknowledged, and if you don't have those traits, Einstein being a good example, he flunked out of school or he was told to leave because he didn't have the particular traits that the education system rewarded.
Or is meditation also part of this curriculum?
Yeah.
Does it play a big role in?
It's something that I encourage as much as I possibly can, but I tell the teachers, if you resonate, so the teachers are, as part of the training program, we give them a little training in very simple meditation technique, learning to relax your body, carry that relaxation into the feelings, and then the thoughts, being able to relax the thoughts and experience that sense of inner peace. So I say, if this is something that you see as valuable, then we want you to bring it into the curriculum.
Okay.
If you can't, if it's something it doesn't work for you, probably don't try to teach meditation because it won't be authentic. Even though I think it's one of the most important things we can do, it's got to be authentic through the teacher. So there'll be other things that I'll ask that teacher to work on. Hopefully they have some kind of qualities like kindness or honesty or something that they can work with. But so in India, because of this incredible culture here, that 90% of the teachers resonate with meditation. If I do this in the West, the percentage is much lower.
Is it?
But it's getting better. It's growing.
Better. Okay.
But the last 50 years have seen a kind of a sea level shift with this appreciation for meditation and yoga.
Okay.
This is actually going back to the founding that was Yogananda's mission. So from 1920 to 1950, he was introducing yoga in the West.
Yeah.
And by the time I got there, 1970, I was enough in the consciousness that I'd found it, but I had to look hard in that point. And so another story that I'd like to tell is that first year I had the school, 1972, the phone rang. And I answered the phone and said, "Hello, Nanda School." She said, "Hi, I wanted to hear about, I'm in the area, I wanted to find out about your school. What makes your school special?" And I said, "Well, we bring in yoga and meditation." And she said, "Oh, yoga." She says, "Oh yeah, we have yoga for breakfast every morning."
Ah.
So the difference between the word yoga and the word yogurt was so at the 1972 there was no difference.
Wow. Okay.
Because she was a good example of where the consciousness was. So, but now, 50 years later, most people, many more people understand what yoga is all about now. But that's new in the West. It's not new in India. It's ancient.
Right. Yeah,
so the meditation is much easier. And the children, you say meditation in a group of Indian students, and most of them have an idea what you're talking about.
Right.
If you were in the West, that would not be the case. You would have to do much more of a implementation. But to answer your question, yoga is a huge tool because yoga develops sensitivity, it expands consciousness, it develops self-awareness, all these wonderful qualities. And so it's a tool that, if there's any way at all to bring it in, I'd like to do it.
Wow, lovely. So sometime back in the conversation, you had used the word maturity.
Yes.
Yeah. So is there any different approach or outlook towards maturity as a word in the Education for Life curriculum, or?
Well, it's a very specific definition of maturity in Education for Life.
Okay.
And it is, like I mentioned briefly, it's the ability to relate to realities other than your own. So it's the ability to expand your awareness to include other realities. Usually, if you take maturity, if you say, what does maturity mean in kind of an outward way, it might be, well, you're old enough to vote, or you're old enough to do all the bad things like smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. So, but this is a specific definition of maturity, which is, as far as I know, it's only in Education for Life is it defined that way. But when you think about it, it's a pretty good definition. That true maturity is being able to relate to other people's realities.
Right. Listening to them, I guess, understanding their perspective.
Understanding, yes.
Yeah, because most of the times I look, when you're having a conversation with somebody, people are just listening to you so that they can promptly give a reply.
Yeah.
Instead of really comprehending what the opposite person is saying. They're in a hurry to reply than to process what the opposite person is saying. Yeah.
But it's a skill that can be developed.
You can, as a skill, it can be developed.
Like even if you're working with, like when we have these circles, like a lot of time, the reason we want to have 12 students is that everybody listens to each other.
Okay.
So you're helping train them that way. You can say, even if as a teacher, so all right, I'm going to ask you and you and you for your, but I'm going to ask, after they finish talking, I'm going to ask 2 questions about what they said and see if you can answer them. So you give the child a reason to listen to his friends and other students and learn from each other. So it's something that the teacher can cultivate in the classroom.
Yeah. And it's really important because I see some children in the family where, when we meet them, they do share some of their stories from school and they say, I struggle. I see them shouting. I'm like, why do you have to raise your voice and talk? Nobody's paying attention to me.
Yes. Yeah.
Why do you have to shout? So they
That's
believe
another offshoot of this system.
Yeah.
Where, you learn to shout.
Yeah, you raise your voice so that people listen to you, I guess. So,
right.
Yeah, pretty sad that they have to think it that way.
Yeah. It's just the priorities. The priorities have nothing to do with listening to each other. The priorities have to do with getting that top score.
Right.
And so everything is biased that way.
Correct. So what kind of challenges have you faced so far in getting this thought process into the Indian school system? Were people open? Was the government open to?
Well, this is the trial run. This first.
Okay.
So starting 3 years ago in Gurgaon, we were invited in by a person who had found out about Education for Life and we're one of the very top people.
Right.
Wanted this brought in, and so she actually hired directors who were sympathetic to it. So we had a top-down appreciation for it, and that was necessary the first time because we had to prove that it could work.
Right.
And so after 3 years, though, we can show that it works. We have some nice data that people can look at and see that there made a big change. Or you can just, the best place, of course, is to experience it and walk down the hallway and feel what it feels like. So at this point now, then it'll be more possible to share it with other places.
Okay.
So we're actually going to start an online training program beginning of next year.
Okay.
And where people from different parts of India, if they're interested in becoming trained on how to lead these laboratories and bring them into their school, they can find out how to do it. So that'll be the next challenge, is taking it out. I think it'll receive a good response because I think a lot of people see the need for this kind of thing.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Yeah. It's the need of the hour right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't met anybody in India who doesn't want to see moral education happen. The problem is, how does it happen? And like you said, if it's done just like the other, it's just a class, it's not what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You're looking for something on a different dimension, and that's what we have shown now can work. So.
Correct. So do we include parents also in this education? Along with children, because I guess to a great extent the parents also play a big role, right? They influence the children.
Yeah.
So
you need supportive parents, parents who appreciate the need for these kind of things.
Right.
Now, of course, not everybody is going to see it that way, and you take a school, you're going to have a very heterogeneous group of people. So you're, in this particular case, and up in Gurgaon, the parents weren't the starting point.
Okay.
They were brought in. Now, one of the things that they do now is they have, what do they call them? Education for Life family retreats.
All right.
So it'll happen on a Saturday where the students and the teacher will just kind of replicate what they do during the laboratories, but the parents will be invited that morning and they'll participate in it.
Okay.
They'll do the meditation, they'll do the games, the activities, they'll be involved in the discussions, and they do it's just little. That's the way that parents are brought in, which has been very nice. Now,
Lovely.
in the West, all the schools, I would say, almost, if I can think of any example, I think all the schools were started by parents who were desperate to have this kind of thing for their children, and made it happen. Created a school so it could be happening. So,
so we can safely say the parents are enthusiastic.
Yeah, if the parents
getting this.
That hasn't happened in India yet. We haven't had a group of parents or a couple of parents get together and say, we want a school like that, and I'm willing to make it happen. But I think that's in the future. So,
all right. Otherwise, the parents would say, "Oh, we send the children to school. It's school's responsibility."
Right. Yep.
Many parents would end up saying that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so parents are part of, and I guess this should be also outside the school, isn't it? I guess anybody and everybody should be part of this sort of education or learning.
It makes life work better.
Yeah. It'll make the world a better place.
You don't have to go very far right now. If you turn on your computer and look at the news, or you get your newspaper, it's crying for change. The basic principles that are guiding this planet right now are taking us toward disaster. And you see it. You see it in climate change. You see it in which climate change is simply a lack of maturity. It's a lack of ability to relate to broader realities. They only relate to their own reality. So if I, use all this energy and most other people don't have used to it, or I throw my trash on the ground and don't care if anybody, it creates this environmental disaster that's been growing now for a long time. But it can be turned around. You see different places that have taken steps to make it. It hasn't happened on a worldwide basis yet, which is why we're still headed down. And then, of course, you look at the political situation where, again, people are shouting at each other rather than talking to each other. So that's where we get if we don't work with these qualities. But, again, you see places where that doesn't happen, where people actually have constructive dialogue. And then you see, so that's the future. There's other parts, unfortunately, right now it's kind of, it's the loudest and gets all the headlines.
Right. So currently, as you said, this is on a trial basis. You doing a trial in India. In the West, has this model been running successfully? And
it's not in public schools in the West yet.
Okay.
All the schools in the West, we have 3 or 4 schools on the West Coast of the United States, and then we have a few schools in Italy, Central Europe, Slovenia.
Okay.
But they're small. They're just small schools. We have a little pilot school in Spain. But all of them are private schools. They're run by, they're started by parents who wanted to do it. It's not in the public school system yet. Again, I think that'll happen. But there was just more, I'm here because there was more interest in India than there was in the United States at that point.
Right. Okay. And you must be simultaneously training teachers also who are equipped to take this approach forward?
Yeah, that's been going on for a long time. We have an online training program for just a general teacher. And then this course I described that we're going to start in first of the year is specifically to train people for these laboratories, which is a kind of a specific application of education for life.
Okay.
Like I said, it's only 1 hour a week in the program. So it's it's not like the whole school is focused on that to begin with.
Wow. Okay. Any success stories or any stories that comes to your mind? Somebody who's going through it or
there's a lot of kinds of success stories. I get to work primarily with adolescents right now, teenagers, and you see these huge changes happening in people, developing self-confidence, developing self-awareness, learning how to live with life. I'll tell you a very dramatic story that happened this past week. So one of the things we have an online high school.
Okay.
So the online high school is international. People can join it from any place in the globe. It's quite small. It's only about 40 students at this point. But because of the political situation in Afghanistan, we have quite a few Afghan students, girls, of course, because they don't have any other option. So I was actually teaching math a week ago. I guess it was last Monday. And one of the girls is from Afghanistan, and so she's online, and we're doing something, and all of a sudden she says, "Nitai, I have to leave because the Taliban are at my front door." And so I said, "Yes, you have to go. Go ahead." So she signed off, and so I sent her a note, and I said, "Let me know when you can talk." And so 4 hours later, I get an email from her saying, "Okay, it's all right. They weren't specifically targeting our house. They were doing a neighborhood search. They had some kind of problem, and they were going house to house."
Wow.
But so the door opens, and I don't think they just barge in. They come in, and they're just. And she said they don't take their boots off, so they're just clunking around the room, and they're looking. They're taking things off. They're throwing down curtains, and they're opening drawers and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so this is the third time it's happened to her family.
Okay.
And so she said, but this time, just last time I was petrified. I couldn't even move. So this time, she said, you put your burqa on. So and then they can't see what you're doing. And she's inside. I was practicing my breathing exercises that were taught in school. And she said it made a huge difference because I could handle. I wasn't overcome by the fear. I was able to just keep my center. And I said, that's a success story.
That's a big success story.
Because she learned to use some of the skills that we talk about in school in a very specific situation. So it makes and there are many, many less dramatic examples of that where people are able to practice honesty or kindness or empathy or whatever it is that helps enrich their life. Make their life work better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. So people don't mix up this philosophy with religion, right? I mean, they're able to
they can be. We have Hindus in our school. We have Christians in our school. Now we have Muslims in our school because of all the people from Afghanistan. And it doesn't make any difference actually. But it's because all of these religions talk about the same values. You don't see any religion encouraging unkindness or dishonesty. So you're looking at these central universal qualities, and that's what the basis of it is. These religion is just different expressions. And it has so much to do with where you're born. If you're born in Karachi, you're going to be a Muslim. If you're born in New York, you might be a Jew. If you're going to be, But underneath it, there's a sameness, and that's unfortunate because in the past, those outward definitions have created divisions between people. So, Education for Life is trying to say that cultivate these deeper things. Then you can appreciate. You can appreciate your Muslim brothers and sisters. You can appreciate your Christian brothers and sisters because you know that you all have the same things in common.
Right. All, each of us has red blood running in our veins. So,
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Nitai, coming back to, where we spoke on meditation, whether we are teaching meditation to children or so. So how important it is for them to get it? Because this story that you narrated about this girl in Afghanistan where she started doing her breathing, I mean, if it's impacting her so much, in a positive way.
We have this is on a very different, profound level that we have sensory experience that for most people is, and if they don't meditate, it's probably about 99% of their experiences comes through the senses. And the senses can get us into trouble by overindulgence. Like you think, okay, if a little food is good, more food is better. And then you end up being overweight and your health suffers and stuff like that. Or I like that feeling of kind of drowsiness that I get with alcohol. And so I'm going to use that, and then you get addicted to alcohol and stuff.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that the senses don't give us enough perspective on. But meditation awakens that inner awareness so we can see the senses in perspective, and we can make a judgment of it. Is eating more food helping me? Or is it just kind of satiating my taste buds? Or is this alcohol helping me really? Or is it just kind of a temporary dullness that
Yeah, numbing me completely.
it's just numbing
Yeah.
me? So meditation, if a child has that inner awareness before they get, say, let's see, it's 12 years old or so, when all those temptations come in, they have a reference point to think about it. That if they don't have it, if they're only in the senses, well, it's just a new sense thing. Let me try it out and see what happens. So it creates this incredibly powerful perspective that can save a lot of pain.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's quite deep, taking them inwards to really experience it rather than just letting things be external and influencing them. Yeah.
A lot of young people don't have any inner awareness. A lot of adults don't have any inner awareness.
Yeah.
And so they're handicapped. I mean, they're handicapped just, if not more, than somebody who's lost a foot or a leg. If you don't have inner self-awareness, your ability to live life successfully is severely diminished.
Right.
So it's a huge help to be able to, cultivate this other side of ourselves.
Correct. And I guess the more children meditate, the more happier they are probably, and they learn better maybe.
Yeah.
Happier children learn better.
Yeah, okay, we can talk about that too. But I'll share one other little quote about this self-awareness thing.
Yeah.
So we, at one point, before we had a high school, we went through 8th grade, 8th standard, and then our children would go on to the local high school. And one of the counselors there was talking one day, and she said, "Your students are different." And I said, "What do you mean? How are they different?" She says, "They know who they are."
Wow. Okay.
And I thought, wow, that is a great compliment. And that's the goal of this meditation and self-awareness. They make their own decisions. They're not just running with the crowd and what's the latest fad, and their life is so fragmented and fragile, but they're rooted in their own awareness, and they're building their lives based on that awareness. So that's why it's important.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, do happy children learn better?
Yeah.
That's been a great, if I was a salesman, I would say that's a great asset to this whole thing.
Okay.
Is that our students do learn better. It's not why we do it. It just kind of happens because stressed out children, you think of yourself, if you're stressed, you don't function as well.
True.
No matter what you're doing. If you're trying to cook your meal for your family, or you're trying to talk to your boss, or whatever you're doing, if you're stressed, you're not functioning on all cylinders. So the same thing with children in their learning process. Learning is an innate joy of childhood. If you watch a 2 or 3 year old, they're just learning machines. They're just going around. They're looking at everything. They're taking I have a little grandson now. He's turned 6 recently, but he was like 3 years old, and we'd open the door, and he'd look at the hinge, and he'd try to figure out, how did that work? He's studying the hinge or the doorknob. You twist the doorknob, and it's like, wow.
Fascinated by it,
He's fascinated. So it's something that's innate in childhood, but it gets, unfortunately, the education system we have generally tends to kill that off because it puts a lot of stress on it, and it becomes not so much fun anymore. It's something like you have to do it, and you're forced to do it in certain ways, not the ways that seem right to you, but the way the teacher says. What was the story that I just heard today? She was talking about she was in school and she was studying ancient history, and the teacher said, in 4000 AB, civilization started in the Babylonian Empire, and this person was telling me a story. She said she was young. She was only about 8 years old, and she raised her hand and says, "What happened before that?" And the teacher says, "Nothing. We just started. That's in this class. This is what started." So it was taught in a very, dogmatic way, which tends to kill off,
curiosity.
You don't want to ask questions anymore because you get cut off unless you're answering the right way. You don't get. There's another story I'll tell. This was in an Indian classroom, and I went in and I was just observing, and the teacher was teaching about ecology, and she said there are three approaches, if I remember correctly, three approaches to alternative energy. There's solar power, water power, and wind power. And then she said, and what are the three approaches to alternative energy? And everybody raised their hand. Solar power, and I thought, well, that's one way of approaching it. So she's at the end. She said, well, do you want to say anything? And I said, okay. Who can think of a fourth way? Who can think of a fourth way? What is there? And nobody, silence. People didn't answer. I just waited. Finally, one boy raised his hand. He says, what about clouds? Could you get energy from clouds? I said, that is the kind of thinking we want to have. We don't want just regurgitation about what the teacher just said. Can you think? And I said,
innovate.
I don't know of anybody that's really ever used clouds, but maybe you'll be the first one. And it was it was like the difference between the two approaches that way. So if a child is in a situation that encourages that kind of thinking, they learn better. And so we've got these, we did this testing in the United States for our school there, and for about 20 years. And consistently, we were in the top 10% of the schools in the United States. And one year we were in the top 1%.
Wow.
But it was just because, and it wasn't that we don't, what's the word again, mug? We don't mug up. We don't want people mugging up. We don't want them, we want them just learning at their own pace and from their own enthusiasm.
Right.
But from that perspective, they would score the top 10%. So all children. So that's what that does. It says your school is good, but it also says the other schools are killing off that by pressuring the kids to have to learn a certain data in a certain time in a certain way.
Right.
It makes it much more.
Mechanical,
unhealthy.
I guess, and
Mechanical. That's a good word.
Yeah. Lovely. And what would you like to share? With everyone.
I'd just like to share that, there are a lot of problems in education. We've experienced it, probably ourselves. Most of you probably wouldn't even be listening to this broadcast. It's possible to change that. Our children don't have to go through the same thing. And if people will take the initiative to start to look at other alternatives like Education for Life, you'll see that it's possible. It's not, there's been from my experience as an educator, and I've been an educator for 50 years, I've seen huge changes and positive things. This whole idea of emotional intelligence, nobody ever mentioned that in the 1970s.
Right.
Now it's kind of, a lot of people, emotional intelligence is something. And if it's done the right way, it's very cultivated. If it's not taught as a lesson that, you have to learn it like you have to learn some physics or something like that.
Right.
So anyway, change is possible. And people can take some initiative and make it happen.
Make it happen, yes. And hopefully, EFL spreads its wings across India. This whole model spreads across.
It has that potential. We'll see.
Has the potential. Definitely has the potential. Yeah. I wish you all the best, Nitai.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming, taking your time out from busy schedule. You're here for a short while, but you took time out to come and chat on this. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
nice
you.
to be here.